Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So today we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 13, verse number 5, from the chapter Appearance of Lord Varaha. So let's get started. Shri Sukha Uvacha Iti Bhruvanam Viduram Vinitam Sahasrasishnas Charno Padahanam Prarishta Roma Bhagavat Kathayam Praniyamano Munir Abhyaschashtaha. Synonyms. Shri Sukha Uvacha. Shri Sukadev Goswami said, Iti, thus. Bhruvanam, speaking, Viduram, unto Vidura, Vinitam, very gentle, Sahasra Sishna, the personality of Godhead, Krishna, Charan, lotus feet, Upadhanam, pillow, Prahastaroma, hairs standing in ecstasy, Bhagavad, in relationship with the personality of Godhead. Kathayam, in the words. Prani Yamanaha, being influenced by such spirit. Muni, the sage. Abhyachashtaha, attempting to speak. Translation. Sri Shukadev Goswami said, the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, was pleased to place his lotus feet on the lap of Vidura because Vidura was very meek and gentle. The sage Maitreya was very pleased with Vidura's word, and being influenced by his spirit, he attempted to speak. Purport. The word Sahasra Shishna is very significant. One who has diverse energies and activities and a wonderful brain is known as Sahasra Shishna. This qualification is applicable only to the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, and no one else. The personality of Godhead was pleased to dine sometimes with Vidura at his home, and while resting, he placed his lotus feet on the lap of Vidura. Maitreya was inspired by the thought of Vidura's wonderful fortune. The hairs on his body stood on end, and he was pleased to narrate the topics of the personality of Godhead with great delight. Okay, so this is a let's get started now. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vanchakalpatarubhyacha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So welcome devotees to today's Bhagavatam class. So we are seeing this particular verse and purport. It's a very short purport and a very simple verse actually. And so, we'll elaborate a little bit on, some things related to the verse and beyond, I think. So in this particular verse, basically this verse is taken from the appearance of Lord Varaha. And two things are emphasized really in this verse when you look at it. One is, the first is the qualities of the devotee of the Lord. And the second thing that is really, that is being talked about is what Maitreya Muni feels. And reference, of course, is made here to Vidura, who was a pure devotee of the Lord, and Maitreya Muni, who was also, very, very learned and, and was asked questions. He was asked questions by Vidura. And before going any further, I was just going to actually read the translation from Vishwanath Chakravarti. His translation is that Maitreya, his hairs standing on end, inspired by Vidura, began to speak topics of the Lord to humble Vidura, who had acted as a pillow for the feet of the Lord and who had just spoken. So when we look at the qualities of the Lord that are being discussed out here with relation to Vidura, it's humility, meekness, being gentle. Those three, those three are really emphasized. And then we also find that Maitreya Muni, the mood of Maitreya Muni, he is so impressed by Vidura just because Vidura has so much of humility, and mostly because Vidura was also, Sri Krishna had given Vidura opportunity for his service. He had come to Vidura's house for eating, for dining, and then he placed in this particular verse, it is said that he placed his lotus feet on Vidura. So that's a matter of great fortune. And so when Vidura started asking questions, at the beginning of the chapter itself, regarding, the Lord's wonderful pastimes and so on, topics that were related to the personality of Godhead, Supreme Personality of Godhead, Maitreya Muni was very, very pleased and very anxious to reply to Vidura and to acquaint, and to talk to Vidura regarding the Lord's, pastimes. So it was just like a matter of like two advanced devotees meeting and, talking about the personality of Godhead, and, how there was so much pleasure out of, this discussion. So I thought that, because the rest of the verses will go more into detail. So the first thing I really wanted to talk about today was some of the qualities of the personality of Godhead, which we can see in our, which we can concentrate on also. And Bhagavad Gita 13.8 to 12, it actually lists 20 items of knowledge, and gives these qualities in some detail, like Srila Prabhupada actually explains. And of course, we are not going to go through all of them, but only, mostly humility, because that relates to, our topic under discussion. But just to remind ourselves, I can just read real quick, like humility, pridelessness, non-violence, tolerance, simplicity, approaching bona fide spiritual master, cleanliness, steadiness, self-control, renouncing objects of sense gratification, absence of false ego, the perception of the evil of birth, death, old age, and disease, detachment, then freedom from entanglement, even-mindedness, constant and unalloyed devotion, aspiring to live in a solitary place, detachment, accepting the importance of self-realization and the philosophical search of absolute truth. So Lord Krishna says that all these are actually items of knowledge. And Srila Prabhupada actually in this particular Bhagavad Gita verse, very nicely he says what humility really means. And this is because, Vidura is totally humble. But what really does humility mean? Humility means, Srila Prabhupada says that one should not be anxious to have the satisfaction of being honored by others, honored by others. And he discusses this in the purport. He says, why is it important that, we should not be anxious for that? Because he says anything honor and dishonor is, related to this body. Like, somebody is honoring you, then it is actually related to your body. But he says anything honor or dishonor pertaining to this body is useless. He says, that was one thing that Srila Prabhupada emphasized in this, that, we should not look for anxious to be honored by others, or dishonored, you really don't care. And so when I was thinking of it, and two things actually sprung into my mind when I was actually thinking about it. So one is that, I've been reading this book, What is the Difficulty, by Shruta Kirti Das, actually, who was the personal servant of Srila Prabhupada. And, just as a side note, this book actually describes different events from Srila Prabhupada's lives, and from the eyes of Shruta Kirti Das, his personal servant. And it was actually, it's really, Shruta, why was this book named this way? When I was curious, his, Shruta Kirti Das went for his initiation, and there was a kirtan, and the room was jam-packed, absolutely jam-packed. There were devotees everywhere, and then after the kirtan was over, everybody, Srila Prabhupada was sitting on his Vyasasana, and everybody just bent down like to offer obeisances. And Shruta Kirti Das, he bent down for, paying his obeisances, and the person behind him also bent down. And Shruta Kirti Das, he rose all of a sudden, and the person behind him, suddenly got taken aback and, rose and pushed Shruta Kirti Das. And Shruta Kirti Das fell by mistake on the right side of Srila Prabhupada's Vyasasana. And, he was so taken aback. And then Srila Prabhupada said, "What's the difficulty?" And Shruta Kirti Das had no, he just couldn't respond. He was so taken aback. And, later on when he served as his personal servant, he said, Srila Prabhupada actually used this term, "What's the difficulty?" many times. And every time the person to whom he used it, his difficulty just vanished. I found that, very interesting. But in any case, and what was actually written in this book, which caught my eye, is that Srila Prabhupada writes, this is during Kartik of 1972, in Radha Damodar, temple. So he says, "So I came here eventually," and this is Srila Prabhupada speaking. "So I came here, and eventually, by Krishna's arrangement, stayed at the most sanctified place, Radha Damodar. It was here that I began writing. I thought it may be published or it may not be published. That does not matter. I will write for purification. That's all." So, we come across so many people, who write for, so that there may be an audience, or in a way, like they want to be honored. But I found it, very inspiring that, when Srila Prabhupada actually started writing, it wasn't like just to be honored, it wasn't to be honored at all. In fact, it was just, he said, in fact, he didn't even know whether his books would be published. Today we are distributing so many books, right, in so many temples. But at that time, he did not even know whether the books would be published. He was just actually started writing for his purification. And of course, later on, it came, for spreading Krishna consciousness, and his books, got us such a wide audience. That's a different thing. But he was not like, his aim was not to get honored. So that I thought was a beautiful example of humility. And we also know that Srila Prabhupada, he did everything on the, for his on his spiritual master's order and for Krishna's pleasure, nothing for himself. So that was a beautiful example of that. Always is very inspiring. Then another example that I saw when I was actually child I was in high school. Actually, I did class 11 and 12 in Kolkata. I studied there for 2 years. So I was in high school over there. And our high school was connected to a college. And at that time, Mother Teresa was called to the college because from what I remember, and it's so many years back, a stamp was released, in her name by Government of India. And so she had to come. And there was this huge preparation, the whole college was so excited. And, they made so many preparations. And, oh, she's coming, she's coming. And, for days this went on. And on that day, it so happened that I was at the side of the stage, and, she was coming. I mean, I was on the stage literally, but in the side, and she came on the stage. And so I got a very close view of her. I didn't talk to her, but I got a very, very close view of her. And I remember thinking that there's going to be this grand celebrity coming, and I was having some great expectations. And when she came, it was like, it was so, just by looking at her, because she was this old, bent lady with like white sari and the blue border, and so simple and so unassuming, so I would say the word humility just comes to you, I think. And then she spoke for very briefly, very soft spoken. I don't even remember what she talked, but the thing is, her smile just lit up the room, and it was so simple and so unassuming. And she so that, I always thought that when I looked at her, that she was so very humble. She was as though she never really thought anything of herself. So that also I kind of remembered when I look. And actually, there's a theologian, C.S. Lewis, who says that humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's not that you're less, but thinking of yourself less. That's what the impression I got when I saw her. So these two, I just this just struck me, when I was looking at the word humility and the way Srila Prabhupada defined it. These two things came to my mind. And then Srila Prabhupada also, actually, in this discussion, he says that everything starts from humility. That is, beginning from practicing humility, you go up to this supreme truth. But the problem is that we think that we are the controllers, we are God. But he says that the beginning of knowledge is actually amanitva, or humility, and one should be humble enough to know that you're subordinate to the Lord. And that is where humility is, where everything starts, is what Srila Prabhupada was saying, is trying to tell us. And then, so we have this whole concept of humility, which, we need to really work on. And I was also thinking that, anytime you speak about humility, it really isn't complete unless you go to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who used to, who was so very humble. He, in fact, he used to always say that he was nothing. He was, even though he was the Lord himself, in the garb of a devotee. But he used to say, I'm nothing. And then he used to say, my love for Krishna is nothing, because he used to consider himself like a fish, like a fish, like how a fish lives in water. And, he says, like, I'm not in water, I'm out of water, but, still I'm surviving. And why am I surviving? His love for Krishna was so great. That means my love is not true. Or, he always used to think himself. Actually, all the devotees, they think themselves nothing. The pure devotees, they always think them in front of God, Lord Krishna, they are really nothing. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu used to say, Jivera Swarupa Hoy Krishnera Nitya Das. That means we are just the servant, that is our position, we are really not this body. And also in this verse in Adi Leela 17.31, I think all of us have heard it, but it's good to read it again. One who thinks himself lower than the grass, who's more tolerant than a tree, and who does not expect personal honor, yet is always prepared to give all respect to others, can very easily chant the holy name of the Lord. So Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu always, in fact, said that it's just the humble person that who's totally dependent upon God. Like, humility is not like a show that you make to outside people. You don't need services just to show people that you are something. It really is something from the heart, that comes internally from the heart. It's something that Krishna can grant you through humility, if you really aspire to be his pure devotee, and something that maybe you need to work upon, and also practice. But the main thing is, if you really have a pure devotional service to Lord Krishna, really grants that to you, along with that. So that's the way that it comes about. Also from Chaitanya Charitamrita, we find, so actually the whole book is actually a lot of humility, at different places exhibited. Like we have this emperor of Orissa, King Prataparudra. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu at first just refused to meet him. He tried so many times, but Mahaprabhu said no, he was refusing to meet him. Then finally, he saw one day Maharaj the Prataprudra, who is taking up a broom to clean the road for Lord Jagannath's yatra and Rath Yatra, and he was so impressed that he embraced the king. So, and also in certain places in the book, we find that when people are like cleaning temples, doing some menial work, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu used to get so much impressed, because it was just, he just saw the humility, of the people in that case, how eager they were to satisfy the Lord, that they could take up any work, that others might even consider maybe lowly, but devotees took it up with such enthusiasm. And also, even Sanatan Goswami, Haridas Thakur, all of them very humble, they won't even Sanatan Goswami wouldn't even go to the temple, because he said that the pujaris will become impure, but Jagannath himself came to see him. And even Haridas Thakur, chanting 22 hours, he didn't think he had qualification to see the Lord. So there's these things, it's just the humility of the pure devotee. You know, so that's what I could think of. And then, so I have two stories, and, just giving different aspects of humility. One is the story from Mahabharata. It is about Yudhishthir Maharaj and Duryodhan. So once they were told, Dronacharya told them that Yudhishthir Maharaj, he said, find someone who is worse than you. Go and look for someone who's worse than you and bring him to me. And he told Yudhishthir, find someone who's better than you and bring them to me. So these both, they traveled throughout the kingdom searching for, people like that, who's better or worse, accordingly. Yudhishthir went and said, I've searched and searched, but I really can't find anyone who is less qualified than me or who is worse than me. I am really the worst. Wherever I'm looking, everyone's better than me. And Duryodhan came and said, I've searched all over and I couldn't find anyone better than me. I'm, in other words, I'm the best. So, so it's just, it just demonstrates that the pure devotee of the Lord, Yudhishthir, he couldn't find not a single person worse than him. He thought he was the most worst. And even Kabir actually has a doha, actually. It reminded me of that because I learned some during my childhood. Bura jo dekhan main chala, bura na milya koi, jo dil khoja aapna, mujhse bura na koi. Means Kabir is saying, I went searching for, evil in the world, but I didn't find, then I looked at my mind and I found really I was the worst, that similar to Yudhishthir Maharaj, I couldn't find anyone who was worse off. So that's how, very elevated personalities look at themselves. They don't have this pride or this ego. And then, I have one more story, and that is related to the United, here in the US where we are living. So that story is, that there was a group of soldiers that was lifting up like a trying to lift up heavy piece of timber. And they couldn't, they were like trying and trying and trying. And there was this corporal who was, who was by their side commanding them that please go ahead and, lift this timber up. And they just couldn't, they were trying. And so there was a passerby, there was a stranger who was walking on, who was mounted on his horse. And he asked the corporal, why aren't you actually helping these people? Because, it doesn't seem that they are able to lift it. Corporal said, this is not my job. I am the corporal. It's for them to do the work. It's not my, I just have to let them do it. So this stranger, he looked for a while at these poor, soldiers, and, he dismounted from his horse, and he helped these people. And soon they were able to lift this timber. Actually, it just took one more man, to join that group. And so the work was done, and then completed the work. The stranger then got up on his horse, and he looked at the corporal and he said, the next time you have a piece of timber that needs lifting, corporal, call for the commander in chief. And then they realized that the stranger, was the commander in chief, and he was none other than George Washington himself, who was the first president of the United States. So it's like he did not think it below his dignity to go and help some soldiers, whereas the corporal did, So that just gives, it just says that any work is not below you. Any service in the temple is not below you. You don't have to be in the limelight, It could be as simple as picking up a piece of paper, or and nobody may be watching. There may be a place in the temple which may be dirty, and you may just clean it. And of course Krishna is watching. Nobody else is watching. Krishna is watching. But the thing is, we are not even actually, sometimes I think that we are not even actually uh, consciously doing it for Krishna. It's like, if you're a mother, you just do it for your child, right? It just comes like automatically. So we have to get to the point. None of us are at that point, because we are not yet like pure devotees, but we have to get to the point where we're just doing things, all the time, just for like, because we are so much in love with Krishna, and and we have so much dependence on him. So that's all that really I had for this. And of course, we coming back to the verses, the verse really was about Vidura and Maitreya, and this is a nice picture actually, where Vidura is requesting Maitreya, for some topics related to Sri Krishna, and Maitreya is very happy to do so. Why? Because Vidura is so humble, he's so meek, and he's so gentle. So that was all that the verse here today was. And that's all I had. If any of you all have any comments or additions or anything, please feel free. Questions?
Hare Krishna Mataji, please accept my humble obeisances. It was a very nice story, the George Washington story, and brings home the point how how we look at ourselves. The C.S. Lewis quote that you were saying, thinking of oneself less and not less of oneself. Really, it's possible when we have the holistic picture, when we have Krishna in that picture, is when the true humility will come. Because God is great and I am tiny, and therefore this is my position. And so it's just a comment, but appreciating the way that you brought, how it's when we see ourselves as a part of the whole, then that the humility is sustainable.
Yes, Mataji. Yes, very good point. Yeah. Is that only when we are totally dependent on God, and we know we are nothing, in front of him, and we totally depend on him. Yes, very nice, Mataji. Thank you. Anybody else?
Hare Krishna Mataji, Dandatam, Krishna Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
First of all, I want to say thank you for a beautiful explanation, and you took it into many different practical examples or real world examples that you gave of how people exhibited humility, and you notice them. I'm just curious on where do we draw the line between being humble versus being, I don't know, oppressed, maybe a strong word, but there's often a line between being humble and somewhere. I'm trying to find the right words. Like being oppressed or exploited or anything like that, right?
Yes, Prabhu, I
Where could
got you.
where could we draw that line?
Yeah. So Srila Prabhupada, he used to he said that one has to be with regard to oneself. One can be submissive, but one has to act boldly for Krishna. Everywhere humility. Actually, his definition of humility, Srila Prabhupada's, was humility is to act boldly for Krishna. So that is there. Now, the thing is that humility should not be mistaken for, self-esteem, that you have no self-esteem. Rather, your self-esteem, I feel, is higher because you're able to, if somebody, you're able to see, accept the faults within yourself. If you have a good self-esteem, if somebody tells you that, points out a fault in you, and you are able to accept that fault. If we have low self-esteem, then we are not able to accept. If somebody tells us that, okay, gets angry, because we are not able to accept that, this is a fault in ourselves, that is there. But at the same time, it does not mean that, that if that you be pushed over, or or you be abused in any way, if it's really genuinely, like it was genuinely abused. Because naturally what happens in abuse is, you cannot give your best, you really cannot give your best. And when you don't feel good about yourself, then how will you really even serve another person in the right way? So I think it's just a balance. The problem with us is when somebody gives us feedback, we tend to resist. We have this whole resistance policy. No, that's not how I am. So the humility is to realize that, okay, somebody said this, or somebody, it may be true. It may be true. Though I don't like it. I really don't like it that they say such things or something. But it may be true. That humility and good self-esteem is that. But yeah, if it's genuine abuse or something, then one doesn't put up with it, but one communicates in a very nice way, like not in a fighting spirit, but in a very nice way, so that it's like you should speak words which please the other person in a way that is pleasing. That itself is also another set of qualities we need to develop, how to communicate without offending the other person, if it is a case of the other person really being abusive. Those are some points. I'm sure others can add if they have something.
Thank you very much, Mataji. I think I got the answer. I think my question was more directed to, as a third party observer, what is my role? Often we can say, okay, whatever, I'll just leave it, or we stand up for others. There's also this saying, we should never be a bystander, right? But I
Yeah,
think you also kind of addressed it by saying that you could still give feedback, but in a humble way and a proper way. I think you kind of, even though I didn't ask a question, I think you answered that one too. Thank you so much, Mataji. I think it's really beautiful. Yes.
okay. Thank you, Prabhu. Anybody else? Okay. If not, then I think we'll stop. We'll close here. Grantraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai. Hare Krishna. Thank you for attending.